Sweet mother, I no go forget you for the suffer where you suffer for me. Sweet mother, I no go.
Welcome to Bring the World Home, a production of the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Hawaii. My name is Mary Robley. I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Senegal, West Africa from 1970 to 1972. I will be the host for today's program. In this program, we will be sharing with you one Peace Corps volunteer's experiences from abroad. Hopefully, our messages of friendship and family with people of all countries and cultures is exhibited in each of our shows. With us today is Vince Costello, who served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Liberia from 1978 to 1980. Welcome, Vince.
Thank you, Mary.
Vince, where is Liberia on our globe?
All right, Mary, here we see Hawaii, and Liberia is almost on the other side of the world, west coast of Africa, right here between Sierra Leone, Guinea, and the Ivory Coast, about 6 degrees north of the equator.
Okay, tell me a little bit about Liberia.
All right, to understand Liberia, you have to understand the American influence in Liberia over the years. So going back as far as 1816, there was an American Colonization Society, which was organized in the United States, and it was primarily made up of white clergymen and freed black slaves. And the idea was that they had at least 3 motives of Christianizing Africa, and also setting up trade routes between Africa and the United States. And then thirdly, as a means of getting rid of freed slaves who might be able to organize the slaves that were still enslaved to revolt against the system. So in 1822, as many as 12,000 freed slaves were on ships going back to the west coast of Africa and landed in Liberia, and they set up the new government there, and for the next 150 years the succeeding presidents were all descendants of these so-called American Liberians.
So what was the language then, the main language of Liberia?
Well, in Liberia there are at least 28 different languages that are spoken. So as you travel around the country, you get on a bus up country and you want to go to Monrovia, the capital, and you might spend all day on a transport of that sort. But as you stop every 10 or 20 miles, different market towns, different other bus stops along the way, you're very likely to run into other languages along the road. So English is actually the national language, and in the schools, English is taught, and students are actually reprimanded or punished for speaking their own local dialects.
What kind of punishment would they be given?
Maybe to go on the principal's farm and do some work for him, or clean up around the school grounds, something minor like that.
So in other words, the principal was hoping that they would break the, the language and speak their own language, and thus be able to get some free labor.
Possibly at times. But free labor was something that was actually expected of the students, because in Liberia, in our school, for instance, it went from kindergarten level to the 8th grade, and there were basically 2 teachers, a principal and an assistant principal. And we're so used to having a job where we get paid, and we get paid regularly, and maybe we never even see a paycheck these days. Money goes into our accounts and we kind of take it for granted. But in a country like Liberia, the principal might go 6 months without seeing a paycheck. So it wouldn't be asking too much of the students when it's time for the principal to plant his farm, and he needs people to scatter the rice seed and scratch it into the soil, and come and cut the rice when it's ready and ready to harvest. So that wouldn't be uncommon at all. It would be a common occurrence to go out and work on someone's farm like that.
Tell me, what was the name of the town or village that you were in?
Okay, I lived in a village called Zanzei, and it was a special opportunity for me because there had never been a road that went all the way to Zanzei. So the Peace Corps had a rule that if they were going to send you somewhere, then you had to at least have a road to get you there. And when the road was completed, then the people of Zanzei requested a Peace Corps volunteer come and work in the clinic and teach in the school there. So I was the first foreigner to be able to experience that. And so, yeah, it was a special opportunity for me.
Now, where is that town is it on the coast or?
No, it's
where is
very up country, up in the bush,
Mhm.
up in the mountains. So in our county, Nimba County, there are mountains about 6,000 foot level. And it's very rugged country, tall trees, jungly, and
Was there a lot of rain? Was it a rainforest like we would experience here
yeah,
in Hilo?
it's
or-
half a year. Yeah, you get plenty of rain in the summertime, which is when the rice is growing and you need a lot of rain. The house that I lived in had a zinc roof, so you have some homes with a traditional thatch roof and then
Mhm.
others with zinc. So
Mhm.
I lived in a room at the principal's house and it had a zinc roof, which was great for collecting water. So I had a water barrel, a 50-gallon drum, and for at least 6 months of the year, I would have a full supply of pretty clean water. The rest of the time, the other 6 months in the dry season, December, January, February, then we'd have to walk to a stream nearby, collect water, and then for myself, I generally would take the time to boil the water, and I had a filter system just to try to stay healthier and kill the germs that might be
Mhm.
found in such water.
Sure. What did you eat?
Okay, in this area, most of Liberia, rice is the main staple, and also cassava. So although most people are farmers, there is a season, hungry season, when the old rice is finished and the new rice is not ready to be harvested, and it's a very difficult time food-wise for people. I used to work as a health educator, and in the clinic in Zanzei, I would give health talks and work with the belly women, the pregnant women, giving health talks to them,
Mhm.
and they would come on a weekly basis. And also, I would go into some of the villages that were like within 10 miles or so of Zanzei, and give health talks in some of the schools. And usually I would walk there on a Thursday afternoon and give a class on Friday morning. But once I stayed in a village called Sanpa, and I stayed at the town chief's house, and at night usually someone would bring me rice and some soup, some greens or some
Mhm.
meat, and someone brought me a bucket of water to bathe with, and I bathed and I waited, and no one brought dinner, and then finally someone came, and it was in September when supplies are running short, and they just simply said, sorry, we don't have any food in the village for dinner tonight, but we'll have something in the morning. And that's what people experience at that time of year.
So during the rainy season, it was more plentiful. Did you eat fish? Was there a river or a stream nearby, or?
Yeah, there were streams nearby, and people had different methods of trapping fish, catching fish in different kinds of bamboo traps.
Mm.
And also there was a good supply of fish that would come upcountry from the coast, so they would dry a lot of fish and send this up to the market areas. So you could usually get something called boni. So it was dried fish from the coast. And then main supply for protein would be meat. So there's different bush meats that people would go out and hunt. There were chickens. Things like cows and goats were in the village but not eaten on a regular basis. They were kept more for special occasions,
Mhm.
weddings, funerals, and elections, something like that. So people would go into the bush, and usually to hunt, they would hunt at night, and primarily when there was no moon. And their method would be to to strap a flashlight onto the side of their head and go into the bush and try to connect with a pair of eyes, and sometimes not sure what they were hunting and what they were shooting at. And
So what was the you know, you're talking about hunting and the
Yeah.
flashlights and everything. What type of animals were most prevalently being hunted?
yeah, there were animals called red deer and black deer, and there were bush pigs. And a lot of these animals you would never see. Even if you walked all day in the forest, you'd never see these animals moving around. And the only time you saw them, they were usually in palm butter, and they were in a bowl next to a bowl of rice. And you ate it, and someone prepared it for you and called you to come and eat with them. There was also something, I mentioned red deer. So this was taboo for women to eat this particular meat.
Why is that?
Because they called it red deer, and they said that it had an abundance of blood when they cleaned this animal and they butchered it. And if women ate it, then when they came to deliver their babies, they would bleed excessively. So this meat was so taboo that it wasn't even permitted in the village. And so it was also a way for men to have a party in the bush. So someone would come to your house and say, so-and-so caught a red deer last night, we're going to have a barbecue. So the men would meet outside of town and drink palm wine and have a lot of meat that they had to finish because they weren't able to bring it back into the village.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you have a story with this, but come on, tell me the story.
So, no, not for that particular one. Just that, yeah, that's on occasion we would go out and eat. There were other things that we ate though that were a little unusual. The bugabugs, for instance. So there are these termites that come out. You have the dry season, December, January, and maybe you get a rain in February. And if the sun shines after that rain, then people will come and tell you that the bugabugs will be out before the sun shines in the morning, the following day. And my friends came to my house and called me. It was maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, and we came out with lanterns and flashlights, and it was like a plague. So the bugabugs, the termites, they're mating in the air, and they lose their wings and land on the ground, and so they can't fly away, and people would just collect them and collect bowls of them, pots of them.
Would they be cooked?
And then they would be cooked over open fire, just parched, just stirred over the heat, maybe with a little bit of salt, and then eaten as a snack or eaten along with rice.
What did bugabugs taste like?
Well, I always describe them like when you're eating a bag of French fries and you've eaten pretty much all of the French fries, but you get down to the corners of the bag and there's these little crispy pieces that are left in there. That's kind of what the bugabugs tasted like. And they only lasted for a day, 2 days, and then you had to wait till the next dry season.
So what did the work that you did there, you mentioned working doing health education, you worked in a health clinic, and then earlier when we spoke, you mentioned also working in the school.
Right.
So could you describe what all you did over there?
Right, so in Liberia, I guess as in most other countries, for Peace Corps volunteers, you have a primary focus. But for a lot of people that doesn't always work out, and so they're advised to always be looking for a secondary project or a tertiary project, something to keep people occupied and busy and working and useful. And so for me, the work in the clinic was part-time, assisting my counterpart, who is a physician's assistant, and the midwives, and then also teaching in the school. So I would teach math and science, and spend a lot of time working on people's farms because that's what everyone else was doing all of the time. So there's always work. It's agricultural society and slash and burn technology. So the soil is not especially fertile, so people need to move their farms every couple of years. So in our village, there might have been about 100 houses, and then outside of the village, there were trails in all directions which led out to people's farms. So in the in the dry season, you'd have to take an axe and go into the forest and start to fell trees and let everything dry. So it would dry February, March, April, and by May, hopefully everything's dried well enough that you can burn it. And then you're ready to plant rice and scratch it into the ground with sticks and pray for rain. And then rains come, and when it's time for the rice to be harvested, a lot of the students, they don't have time for school. They've got to stay out and throw stones at the birds that come to eat the rice. They've got to stay out and be the guards on the farms to make sure that no more is lost to the birds or rodents. So they have a lot of work to do, students, besides their studies in such society.
What about music? I know when I was in Senegal on the western coast of Africa, it didn't take much of anything, any excuse to play the drums. The first drop of rain, you could start hearing the tom-toms and everybody gather and dance and sing. Did they have music there?
Yeah, and in our village, I guess we had a few exceptional musicians. So we had a few guys that could play a guitar with, even if it had a fishing line on it, they could make music, and everyone could play the drum. So whenever there was any kind of work to be done, there was always drumming, there was always music. So you would never, say, help someone build their house or dig a hole in the ground for someone's burial or work on someone's farm without music. So you'd have someone drumming, you'd have someone singing, and people would work along with that music and work to the beat.
Okay.
Yeah.
What possessed you to join the Peace Corps? I mean, I know what my reasons are for joining. I was young and idealistic and ready to save the world. What were yours?
Right. Well, I'm old enough to remember in 1961 when the Peace Corps was started, so I remember watching TV and following it in the news and having an interest even that young, as a young boy, to be able to dedicate a period of time like the Peace Corps, working overseas, trying to help others in developing countries. I also enjoy travel, and a Peace Corps, although it's not exactly travel, it's much more challenging than being able to go somewhere and learn about another culture. It's kind of exceptional in that you live there, you learn the language, you learn the culture, you live as other people around you are living. And people appreciate it. They certainly do if you're learning their language. And in our village, the kids that would go to school, they would learn English. But older people, younger people that weren't in school yet, they only spoke their native language. So if you were going to communicate with someone that was 40 or 50 years old, you had to be able to speak the language, or you'd need someone to interpret what they were saying.
So did you speak the language?
I think in Liberia, I learned, I studied. It's because the national language is English. Probably on a universal basis, we probably didn't do as well as volunteers in other countries that didn't have the English that they could use as well. But sure,
you picked up a few words here and there.
Right.
Okay. And you stated the reasons why you joined the Peace Corps. How was it in terms of the difference between where you came from and ending up in a village, a rather small village, I think you mentioned, in upcountry Liberia, being one of the first foreigners, I guess, that went to that village. How did that feel? Was there a culture shock, or was it exciting, or what was it?
Yeah, well, thinking back to the period of time when I was planning to go and leave New Jersey and go to Liberia, I actually had a friend of mine who warned me not to end up in a pot of soup. So this was kind of the attitude that a lot of people had. You're going to Africa, that's a pretty wild country, be careful. But it was nothing like that where I lived, because in 1980 there was a military coup, and the president was assassinated. So I was actually on someone's farm that day working, coming back into the village, and the principal of the school saw me and he said, the president's been assassinated. So this was 1980, and my first impression was Jimmy Carter. And I asked him to repeat it. I said, what did you say? And he said, William Tolbert, the president of Liberia, has been assassinated. So people were literally dancing in the streets because the president and those in power at that time had a reputation for corruption. And so now the president was assassinated, the military took over, and people were optimistic that things would get better. So the mastermind of the coup was 28-year-old Master Sergeant Samuel Kayando. The following day he came on the radio and made a lot of huge promises to people that there would be free elections in 6 months when things quieted down. There would be free education, free health care, better roads, electricity, higher standard of living. And people were just so optimistic. I felt sad at the time because I just couldn't imagine how all of this was going to come about. And he even said, the Master Sergeant that became president, that it wasn't going to be a who-you-know society anymore, which is what a lot of people felt had come down from the American colonization society, that it was 2% of the population, American Liberians, that had the best positions and the best education and ran the country. But it was going to be a matter of what you know, what you can do. But there were a lot of intertribal struggles in Liberia from that time, from 1980 on until just this past year, when the United Nations inserted a temporary interim president, Bryant, until further elections. So there was a lot of social unrest for that long period of time. And in the cities, there were curfews when the coup took place. In my village, people came to me and said, you don't have anything to worry about. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're safe with us.
Sure.
And in the cities, the military had taken over. They had always had the guns, but they never had the power, and now they had both, and they abused it in many cases. And a lot of people were killed. A lot of people in power were assassinated. And it was the first time that I remember people coming from the city into the village, because usually it was the exodus from the village to the city. People wanted to get out and go to town, go to the cities for some excitement. It was the opposite, because they wanted to come to the village where they could walk freely. Even after dark, there was no curfew. So things changed.
Things changed. The Peace Corps left Liberia, is that correct? They left sometime in the early 80s, shortly after the takeover?
Right. I think at the time of the military coup, about 10% of the volunteers left the country. I think at the time there were about 200 volunteers, and about 10% left because their jobs were directly affected, or they didn't feel safe in cities that they were in. And then the Peace Corps remained for a few more years, I think, until there was just too much fighting between the different tribes. And at the present time, they aren't present in Liberia.
Yeah, I know I think one of the benefits of being in the Peace Corps as a Peace Corps volunteer is Peace Corps volunteers are pretty well taken care of, and they're really, for the most part, very safe in the countries that they're in. So when they're taking people out of those countries, the Peace Corps volunteers, it's definitely because of a lot of strife internally in the country. Can we talk about maybe getting on a little lighter subject now? What did people, you mentioned the palm wine and the eating of the red deer in the forest, but what other things did people do for fun? And did they play games, for example?
Okay, one of the games that people would play is this seed game, where two people can play against each other. So you would reach into one of these 6 holes in front of you and spread the seeds out. and your opponent would do the same from your side. And you continue spreading them out until you end up with 2 or 3 in a pile, in which case, if it ended up like this, then I could win those seeds and put them on my side. And as the game goes on, you would win some, and then we would play until either you couldn't win any more seeds, or the game finished, and you would add them up and see who had more. They also played a very aggressive sort of checkers. So on a regular checkerboard, there are 8 by 8 squares, so you have 64 squares. But on a Liberian checkerboard, you would have 10 by 10. You'd have 100 squares, and you would play maybe with bottle caps, or maybe you'd play with the caps of batteries, the battery tops, and you would play on a very large scale game.
Sure.
And they played many different card games. You mentioned music earlier. So in the evening time, would it be uncommon for people just to be walking around singing, groups of people, especially when the moon was shining? So there's a lot of moonlight, and people, because people don't always have flashlights or lanterns to get around, so nights can be pretty quiet. But when the moon's shining bright, people would be out sometimes literally all night, and singing, and get together with groups. Sometimes someone would show up with something like an accordion, and have a group with some drummers and a guitar player. And sports-wise, soccer was the game in town. So we would go to other villages. Villages would come to play at our field, and that was always a lot of fun. It was mainly the guys that would play. Girls would play kickball. They'd have their kickball team. But the guys would play against other villages, and at times, these were pretty hotly contested matches.
Good. Well, we're running out of time. Please join us next time when we visit another country and bring the world home.